Welcome back to Exotic Wine Travel. I'm your host, Matthew Horkey, and we have a very special guest on the show today. Somebody that Shireen and I have been wanting to meet for a long time. So for you wine nerds, you probably should know who is sitting right next to me. For those of you who don't know, I have a columnist for Decanter, contributing editor to World of Fine Wines, Financial Times. You're co-chair of Decanter World Wine Awards, correct? Vice president of Decanter World Wine Awards Asia.
Vice chair, yep.
Author of more than 13 wine books. We have Andrew Jefford. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here with you, Matthew.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Most wine geeks know who you are, but for those that don't, you want to give a little kind of brief intro about yourself, your wine history, anything that you...
Okay.
You should know?
Yeah, well, I've been on the wine trail, like you are very much nowadays, for about 30 years. So you pick up a little bit as you go. I've been lucky enough to have the chance to turn that into a lot of writing down the years, which I've really enjoyed doing. I love writing.
Okay.
Some of it is in books, most of it has been in journalism. And here we are today in Croatia.
For people that know, you live in Europe, right? Correct?
Yeah, I live near Montpellier in France. Yeah.
So the world of fine wine. So it's awesome. We're here in actually in Kutjevo in Slovenia. We're actually at Kutjevo Cellars tasting. We just tasted some archive wines back to the '60s even. You want to talk about? This is your first time in Croatia. What was your familiarity with Croatian wine before you even got here?
Well, in recent years, particularly in Decanter World Wine Awards, we've been coming across some very interesting wines out of Croatia, the Malvazias out of Istria and so on. It just got my curiosity going, and I'm always looking for, I write columns, so I have to keep the variety up, I have to keep going to new places and discovering new things and passing that on. So it seemed like a great opportunity to come over here.
I'd like that you were enthused about coming over here.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really very interesting wines coming out of Croatia in recent years. And people outside Croatia don't know those so well yet. A lot to discover. And so now to be here in the country and, get some feel for the actual physical texture of the place is wonderful too, as well as the wines.
We haven't actually, Andrew hasn't been to Istria. He'll be going over there tomorrow afternoon. But we did sit down over a couple of days, tasted through a lot of wines from the uplands, from Slovenia, from Dalmatia. You obviously here in Slovenia get to visit.
Yeah.
What's your overall impression from what you've tasted thus far?
Yeah. Well, Croatia is the physical texture of Croatia is interesting. It's a long, stretched out, bent, curved round sort of country, and it goes through many different climate zones too. So you would expect there to be considerable variety within the wines, and in fact that's what we found in the tasting over the last couple of days. So you have everything from sort of super light and graceful white wines through much more structured white wines from the Mediterranean zone, let's say. And then you have these really very interesting red wines, very typically classical European red wines. In some ways, people who are new to them might find them a little bit difficult because they're quite rich in tannin and quite structured and quite firm and often very characterful in their profiles. But that's the sort of wine I like. I like tannin. I like wine with tannin. I like wine that goes with food. For me, the tannins are very important because somehow inside the tannin of all great red wine is the profundity, the real depth, the really interesting things are sort of hidden inside the tannins. They can seem a bit difficult when you first come across them as a new drinker, but when the more time you pass with them, the more you understand them, the more profoundly interesting that side of the flavour actually is, I think. So I was really thrilled to discover quite a lot of wines like that yesterday.
You liked, in particular, a few grape varieties. Can you name off the top of your head things that stood out?
Well, we were just talking about, the reds. Obviously, Plavac Mali is, the distinctive signature red from Dalmatia, that was interesting. But for example, here today in Slovenia, which is the other end of Croatia, we've been tasting some Cabernets and Merlots, international varieties. And actually, you can see that they also have structure. They're not simple, light and fruity wines at all. They have a different profile because this is a different place. It's not necessarily a distinctly cooler place, but certainly a much greener sort of place, slightly higher altitude and set well away from the Adriatic Sea. So a very different style to them, a different weight. But at the same time, there is that kind of structured firmness there as well.
I know that you were really fond of Plavec Mali, and it's a love it, kind of hate it grape. For those of you watching, you know that Sharina loves it. I'm a little bit more lukewarm on it. What was it that intrigued you so much about that variety?
Well, you know, it's really the tannic structure and the nature of the fruit. And when we talk about the nature of the fruit, you know, you're really getting towards the thing that makes the variety unique, actually, because we were searching around afterwards for other varieties to try and describe it in terms of, in order to kind of pass on some information about it. Of course, every grape variety really is itself, so you have to taste it, otherwise you'll never really understand what it is. But for me, it wasn't, sometimes analogies have been made with Nebbiolo, but it wasn't particularly like Nebbiolo, because what you have with grape Nebbiolo is, it is tannic, depends slightly how it's aged, but it can be aged to silky smoothness, but in principle it's a tannic grape variety. But they're the sort of tannins that you don't necessarily feel on the side of your tongue, it's further back in the throat actually very often. And the tannic structure in a Nebbiolo is often quite almost separate from quite vivid acid structure as well. Mm-hmm. So there's a sort of a kind of bipolar tension in the wine that you don't get at all in Plavec Mali. Plavec Mali for me was much more like really great Merlot can be tannic from Pomerol Saint-Emilion, right bank Bordeaux. Not so much elsewhere, but certainly in those places. A little bit in Tuscany as well. But to me, the tannins of the Plavec Mali are a little bit more like that. And then another great variety we were thinking about, you know, to compare it with would be Saperavi from Georgia. Mm-hmm. So sort of somewhere between those two poles, there is this interesting, unique grape variety here on the Adriatic coast, which is doing something really quite distinguished and noble. Serious wine for sure.
That's great to hear. I'm the one that made the Nebbiolo comparison, and unfortunately nothing in the tasting tasted like that. Shows how green I am. But anyways,
well, no, it's all about the discussion. You know, I mean, you know, I'm not saying I'm right, but that's just the way I perceived it yesterday. And then the other thing we noticed yesterday, we had a chance to look at some older wines.
Yes.
And you know, you can see how well it ages. You know, I had a chance to do some historic tasting of Saperavi at the end of last year out in Georgia, and I was very surprised by how quickly the Georgian Saperavi can modulate. It changes and transforms, and the tannins actually soften out quite remarkably swiftly. Whereas Plavec Mali, they hang around. They're still there a lot later.
They don't disappear.
And then, of course, another variety that made us think of was Zino Mavro from Greece. So, you know, lots of these interesting comparisons to make.
So what do you see? You actually surprised me with your enthusiasm with some of the wines. Overall in quality, kind of what do you see? A lot of people don't know, like Croatia even makes wines, or considered to be Eastern Europe, Eastern Bloc. How do you compare the quality in terms of, you know, some of the more renowned wine regions around the world?
Well, you know, we've talked mainly about red wine so far, but actually Croatia is mainly, I believe, white wine, and you know, there are these very distinctive, unique varieties for white wine too. You know, here we are in Slovenia, so we've been tasting Grasovina. Mm-hmm. Which is sometimes, it goes by other names elsewhere, Welsh Riesling and Riesling Italico and so on. And, you know, I remember when I was a little boy just discovering wine 35, 40 years ago. Back in those days, my dad used to buy bottles of, I think it came out of Serbia, sort of Lasky Riesling.
Oh, Lasky Riesling,
yeah. Which was a very kind of simple, fresh, quaffing white. And to discover just how actually serious and good that can be in the right place, and this is obviously the right place for it, was a real eye-opener. So that's been one thing. Obviously, these extraordinary Malvasias from Istria are very, very interesting. That's a structured white variety. It's not fresh, it's not green, it's not planty, it's not sappy in the same way that the Grasovina is. It's a broader structure, almost more lemony, more floral. but always broad and structured. We actually haven't got to Istria yet. We're going there, in the next couple of days, so I'll be able to describe it a little bit better then, probably. But then the other interesting one that we came across yesterday was Poship. Yep. Poship.
Like Poship.
Poship. Okay. Which is from down in Dalmatia again, and made in a variety of styles. But some of the contemporary styles are actually shockingly good in terms of fragrance and freshness and intrigue and sappiness. There's a density there. And, when I think how much sort of second-rate Sauvignon Blanc there is floating around the world, you have a wine like that, which is really noble and profound and interesting and shockingly good in some ways, way better than a lot of, the trivial Sauvignon that people are quaffing, or the sort of throwaway Pinot Grigios and so on. It just seems such a shame that wines like this are as yet underappreciated. It will come, but for the time being, the world doesn't know about these wines, and there are these treasures just waiting there to be discovered.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we're all about. So, what do you think? Not only Croatia, we cover a lot of Eastern Europe and a lot of odd countries. Even, what do you think these countries need to do to kind of position themselves, get their wines more known to the outside world?
Well, the best thing they can do is the thing that all the best people in those countries are doing at the moment, which is simply make the best wine you can, because the world is very mobile now. There are people like you traveling around, people like me traveling around. I'm involved in wine education more and more so nowadays. People are hugely hungry to learn about wine. Wine tourism is booming. People want to go out and discover things. So the best thing that all the winemakers can do in those locations is just refine their art, really think seriously about what they're doing, do it well, create something beautiful, and then people will find their way to you, I'm sure. I don't think you have to necessarily stress yourself out to have a kind of enormous marketing campaign, unless you really have trouble selling enough to make a living, which I don't think anybody in Croatia does. If you make good wine in Croatia, you will make a living. Yeah. Maybe in Moldova it's a bit different, I don't know. But anyway, in a country like Croatia, probably Georgia nowadays as well, certainly in Slovenia, countries like that, people now appreciate the quality of the wine that's to be found in these places, and people are ready to beat a path to their door. And, sommeliers help a lot. Sommeliers, want to discover new things all the time. They taste well. They're thinking about wine and food the whole time. So they're not hidebound in the way they used to be. In fact, almost the opposite. They've almost become fashion crazed. But at least the whole quest for something that's fashionable and interesting is bringing these kind of wines to the fore, as well as the more exaggeratedly fashionable things.
I find it funny, even though we get straight, obviously we cover and write about all these new fashionable things. I love everybody goes away from some of the classics, and now you can go, like in Bordeaux, can go in and grab great wine for basically peanuts, not at the top.
Yeah.
What do you see, for the last question, kind of what you've seen it from afar, judging it, being the chair in the Decanter World Wine Awards, seeing countries like Croatia, others Eastern European countries get more and more medals, and now you've been here, you've tasted, you've smelled, you've seen firsthand. What do you kind of foresee for Croatia, maybe Eastern Europe at large going forward?
Yeah, well, as long as the world keeps on a steady, prosperous course, which is never certain, but let's hope it is. That's the way things are going to pan out. I foresee a very bright future for these countries, because they're not really up against the wall as far as climate change is concerned. There's a fair amount of latitude here still. We're here in Slovenia. It's been pouring with rain for 3 days in mid to late June, and there's no problem of drought here, for example, at the moment. Quite the opposite.
Yeah.
So they can sort of, I don't want to say relax. Nobody can relax about climate change, but maybe they're a little bit less threatened by climate change than some of the more extreme southern hemisphere locations, for example. They have, people want authentic products. People want products with a history, with a story, with a sense of place to them, with this famous sense of terroir that people talk about. And these wines and these places have all that in spades. So, they've got an awful lot of credit. They've got an awful lot to offer that the world wants. So they just have to keep refining their art, as I say, keep presenting it in an intelligible way, keep not just working at the winemaking, but working at the packaging and the design and the conceptualization and the storytelling, because the storytelling is immensely important too. No wine should ever go to market without a back label. The back label is a chance to tell your story, and tell it directly to the consumer as they're drinking the wine. So as long as they do all of those things, I think they have a very bright future.
Well, thank you so much. I know we would love to sit there and talk for hours, but I'll have to cut. You're a busy man, so thank you so much. Really, people can find your work on Decanter. I'll put your website on andrewjefford.com. And you put World of Fine Wine, correct?
World of Fine Wine, absolutely. Every 3 months, there's a book called Andrew Jefford's Wine Course. If you want to have an introductory book on wine,
I'll put that in the description box too.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for
welcome.
being with us. Thank you, guys. If you want to learn more about Croatian wine, I'll put the link to our book actually in the video too. And if you like this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Exotic Wine Travel, and we will see you at the next episode.